Hello and welcome to Weir Wednesdays, a project where we take a deeper look at work in the Weir collection at RiverBrink. My name is Deborah Antonsik and I'm the Director Curator. Today we're going to be looking at this work by William Brymner, A Country Store Interior from July of 1882. It's a very special work because it's one of the very few interior paintings that we have, or paintings of interiors, in a collection that holds many landscapes, cityscapes, and still life paintings. We have very few, and portraits, but we have very few interior genre scenes such as this one. According to the artist's niece, Grace Brymner, the location is the general store in Jones Falls on the Rideau Canal between Kingston and Ottawa. Sam Weir knew it as a popular fishing spot. And here we're looking at a view from circa 1900 across the Rideau towards the Hotel Kenny, a photograph from the Archives of Ontario. Jones Falls is certainly a scenic village, one of many fascinating and picturesque sites on the Rideau, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Canal construction at Jones Falls took place from 1827 to 1832 when the canal opened. By the 1880s, Jones Falls had a hotel, the Hotel Kenny, established in 1877, which expanded over the years to encompass the general store in one of the hotel buildings, one of the snack bars, and it's apparently still in existence, although much altered. Curator Janet Braid believed Brymner was in Lanark County in 1882, working on illustrations for a book on the lumber business. Illustrations for shanty, forest, and river life in the backwoods of Canada by Joshua Fraser, published in 1883. While in the area, the artist may even have stayed at Hotel Kenny, which has received many celebrated visitors over the years. Born in Scotland in 1855, Brymner moved with his family to Lower Canada in 1857 and then to Montreal and Ottawa. As a young man, Brymner intended to pursue a career as an architect and traveled to Paris in 1878 for training. But he switched to painting and enrolled in the Académie Julienne, a well-known private art school in Paris, which accepted non-French-speaking students. Brymner also studied with Jules-Joseph Lefebvre and Gustave Boulanger, and then Tony Robert Fleury and Adolphe William Bouguereau. The typical course of study focused on drawing as foundational training for an artist, and then initially drawing from plaster casts and then live models. Beginning in the fall of 1879, Brymner attended anatomy lessons at the École des Beaux-Arts, and I'm showing you one of the ateliers with live modeling taking place. He studied the anatomy in order to better understand the human body. After the lectures, students were allowed to remain and sketch the cadaver. Around this time, Brymner began to paint and then took lessons with Carolus Duran, a noted colorist. Brymner received permission to copy in the Louvre, hoping to support himself as a painter. Sales were few, unfortunately, and back in Canada, he took a teaching job at the Art Association of Canada Art School in Ottawa in 1880-81 and again in 82-83. He returned to the Académie Julienne periodically throughout the 1880s, but spent the summer of 1885 in Canada, traveling to the Bay St. Paul region of Quebec. Our painting is an early work from the period when Brymner was applying his academic training to Canadian subjects. It's one of the few genre scenes or scene of everyday life by the artist. We might think of it as a transitional painting, one where the figure is still a dominant subject. This focus was a product of the French academic training, which emphasized the superiority and the importance of the human figure as a subject, a holdover from the great history paintings of the 19th century. over pure landscape that would be taken up by the Impressionists. Often the figure paintings would be staged and the figures paid models. This may account for the sense of stillness, the slightly static rendering of the figures in the country store. The details of the interior are carefully noted, from the crowded shelves in the background to the decoration of the cast iron stove. But the figures are posed rather than spontaneously interacting in space. It's a carefully composed moment, frozen in time. Here we're looking at a self-portrait from the collection of the Agnes Etherington. In the self-portrait from the previous year, Brymner displays the results of his academic training, employing light and shading in charcoal. We have a sense of Brymner as a serious young artist, perhaps contemplating his future, wondering if he will succeed as an artist. Brymner painted this work, the Weaver, and some other rustic genre scenes in Baie Saint Paul, Quebec, which he visited in 1885 and returned to several times. With these paintings, he explores rural life in post-Confederation Canada, but without a focus on social injustice and rural poverty found in the work of his contemporary French realists, such as Jean-François Millet. One possible exception is this painting, giving out rations to the Blackfoot Indians, Northwest Territories, from 1886, from the Art Gallery of Hamilton collection. The painting exposes the dire conditions of the Blackfoot in Alberta, near starvation following their forced relocation to accommodate railroad construction, and the loss of the vast herds of buffalo on the prairie. In some ways, it's a sympathetic and thoughtful rendering of suffering, but our attention is nonetheless drawn to the white settler calmly measuring out rations of flour, who's bathed in light and is apparently indifferent to the plight of the Blackfoot. At best, it's an ambiguous portrayal of colonial power in Western Canada and a rare subject for the artist. In 1886, Brymner was elected a full member of the Royal Canadian Academy, and his diploma piece, A Wreath of Flowers, was deposited at the National Gallery. It was one of 4 paintings that were featured in the Canadian section of the Colonial and Indian exhibition held that summer in London, England. The same year, he became a member of the Ontario Society of Artists and traveled by train through Western Canada. Returning east, Brymner accepted an appointment to teach at the Art Association of Montreal School of Art. He would hold the post from 1886 to his retirement in 1921. This was a final capitulation for Brymner, who had hoped to support himself as an artist and avoid a teaching career. In 1887, he became director and remained at the school for the next 35 years. Despite his reluctance to accept his fate, Brymner was a highly valued and gifted teacher. His students included many well-known artists, essentially a who's who of Canadian art: Emily Coonan, Clarence Gagnon, Prudence Heward, Edward Holgate, Kathleen Morris, Anne Savage, and on and on. A generation of the first Canadian-trained artists studied with Brymner in Montreal, so an extremely influential teacher. Based in Montreal, Brymner divided his time between winter teaching duties and holidays spent painting in Europe and Canada. The general store interior is one of 2 paintings by Brymner in the Weir collection. The other is this work, titled Evening Shadows, on view in the exhibition Canadian Impressionism. This is more typical of Brymner's later work, when he's exploring the landscapes in the style of the Barbizon school. Of the general store interior, Sam Weir had this to say to curator Janet Braid as she prepared Brymner's retrospective exhibition, in 1979 at the Agnes Etherington Art Center in Kingston. Sam wrote, "I like this painting because it illustrates the early life of Ontario, when customers gathered around the stove in the store and discussed the problems of the country." End quote. Weir's description speaks to a longing that we all might feel for a simpler time. Thank you very much for joining me, and look forward to the next session of Weir Wednesdays.